During and before the 20th century, war has been occurring frequently, with the last major war being World War II. Unfortunately, Malaysia has been targeted during World War II by one of the superpowers from the Axis, Japan. So what made Japan plan to invade Malaysia despite their little contribution to the war? What caused tensions between these two countries? And how exactly did Japan invade Malaysia in just weeks? Let's dive into the top 5 reasons why and how Japan invaded Malaysia. Throughout this time, Malaysia was under the rule of British between the 18th century to the mid-20th century, called Malaya. The British were part of the Allies while the opposition was the Axis. With Japan being part of the Axis, this grew tension between Japan and Malaya. Malaya was located between India and China, which suggests that Malaya would be the entrepot of most of the resources. Japan was worried that in due time, British would be able to fully utilize the strategic location and the resources to strengthen their military power, which has catalyzed the triggering intention of an invasion. Japan also had insufficient resources to sustain itself due to United States, Britain, and Netherlands blocking every trading to Japan. This made Japan target Malaysia as it is a peninsula that has abundant of resources available. These included rubber, tin, and iron, vital materials for ammunition and vehicle manufacturing. Furthermore, the invasion of Malaysia was Japan's propaganda plan called the Outline Plan for the execution of the empire's national policy, where its aim is to provide protection for Japan's islands by expanding its borders in order for air attacks to be almost impossible by the Allies. However, their strategy was to influence citizens of Malaysia that this plan was instead to strengthen Asia as a whole. The other reason besides their attack in Malaysia is that they were aiming to attack Singapore, which is one of the main headquarters for British as it was a strategic location. Therefore, an attack in Malaysia will allow the Japanese to easily invade Singapore to wipe out the British since they are neighbors.
Not only that, Southeast Asia, who supplied the British with rubber, tin, and many other resources, indicates bad news to Japan as British was the enemy. Malaysia was one of the biggest contributors for the world trade at the time as it produced 38% of rubber and 58% of tin. Japan was in desperate need of oil too, and although Malaysia does not contain plentiful oil, it is still a perfect location for them to set up their invasion to further conquer the other islands of Southeast Asia such as Borneo, Burma, and Guam. Regarding on how Japan invaded Malaysia, they attacked by surprise by using the bad weather that camouflaged the fleet from scouting planes, making it unpredictable for the British to know where they were heading. By the time British confirmed it to be an invasion by the Japanese people, they were really close to the borders and Kota Bharu was sheltered and later on quickly swept by the Japanese infantry with late warnings. Furthermore, the defenses by British in both Malaya and Singapore were unprepared for war as they weren't adapted to jungle warfare. Their soldiers' coordination was bad as they lacked training, have poor equipment and mostly were conscripts from India. The lack of communication also weakened these soldiers, making them easy target for the Japanese. Lastly, the Japanese were able to push fast by using bicycles on smooth roads built by the British. This resulted in Japan being able to take control of Kedah in a short amount of time and Jitra, a strategic location where a few well-equipped air bases were left by the British. Penang was also taken by landing troops who had little opposition as the British had already retreated. The British did try to slow them down by destroying important bridges. However, the Japanese were well prepared with engineering units. Then, the Japanese was able to break through and finally arrive at Kuala Lumpur, which was the main British base in Malaysia. And as a result, Japan was able to fully invade Malaysia. To summarize this, the Japanese army's successful invasion is attributed to various factors which include strategic plannings, well-trained soldiers and many more. Their victory over Singapore and Malaya was significant and historical moments for Japan because it was shown to the world that Japanese army was superior compared to the British forces. Besides that, it was important to note that the Japanese succession was heavily reliant on well-planned missions by its brilliant commander, General Yamashita, as well as his experienced troops. They had prepared accordingly in terms of modern military and war equipments, effective and excellent tactics, strategies, and coordination. The Japanese propaganda was also important because it was accepted by Malayan people to release them from British, and this had granted the Japanese an easier way through Malaya. Meanwhile, the British were very unprepared, and the decision from their leader regarding force allocations has prevented the British in Malaya to be better supported by their air and naval forces. The British was also being arrogant and complacency, as they did not expect other forces to overpower their colonial territories, which therefore contributed to their loss.